Good morning and welcome to a very special hour of 3+U. I'm excited to bring this hour to you today. It's something I felt would be beneficial to talk about for a long time, actually. Like many of you, I'm watching and learning as my mom gets older. She's 94 now, and my brothers and I find ourselves talking a lot about how we can best help her navigate these next years to optimize her physical and mental health as independently as possible while being aware that life is going to change. It's not always easy to figure out for us or for her. So just like we joke about wishing that parenting came with a manual, I think the same is true for how we age. You don't know what it's going to be like until you're there. But this morning, we hope to help you prepare a little bit. We're calling this show Aging Well. That's the goal, after all, isn't it? To age well. So whether you are the adult child watching this morning or a senior yourself with some concerns of what might be happening in your life, this hour is for you. We have assembled a panel of experts who will guide us through topics ranging from nutrition and general health to estate concerns and memory care. We're also happy to have a small studio audience with us as well. They're going to be able to ask questions to the panel too as we go along. So let's get started by introducing you to the panel. Many of them are going to be familiar to you if you watch 3+U on a regular basis. Nancy Cogar is an elder law attorney in Chattanooga focusing on estate planning, tax preparation, and all things related to aging. Beth Janney is the corporate director of memory care for Morning Point Assisted Living and Memory Care. Ed Jones is the owner of Nutrition World in East Brainerd, and Dr. Shayla Toombs-Withers provides concierge medicine at her family practice, Essence of Health Wellness Clinic. So good to have all four of you here. Thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you.
I want to start kind of with some numbers, if you will, to kind of speak, I think, to the relevance of the conversation today. And I found the number, Nancy, on your website. When I shared it with Beth, she added to it. Okay. The number was that I think it's by 2035, the majority of Americans are going to be 65 and older. Does that sound right?
There'll be more people over 65 than any other age group.
Wow.
So that is significant. And you added to it, Beth, to say that that number even can be broken down more specifically.
I did, because I wanted to thank you so much for focusing on this topic because it impacts so many people. In the state of Tennessee currently, there are 1.6 million people that are over the age of 60 and 129,000 people who have been diagnosed with dementia. That number is probably higher because that means it's just the people who have been diagnosed. And not everybody has gone forward to be diagnosed. And if you think about it, whether you have dementia or not, but if you have a person who is an older adult who requires care and you assign one caregiver for those with dementia, that's 260,000 people in our state.
So that's a lot of people watching today.
That is affected by aging and a dementia diagnosis.
And I think, just to give one more number that you shared with me, I believe it was 1 in 8, if you continue to break that down even more.
And by 2030, 1 in 8 will be diagnosed with dementia.
Okay, so Dr. Withers, let me throw this one to you, because no one thinks that children are mini adults, right? They require a pediatrician.
Exactly.
So as we age, is it important to have a doctor who understands how we are going to change as we age?
Right, yeah, it certainly is. And there is a specialty, it's called geriatrics, which is a specialty that is just meant for aging individuals. However, I always encourage folks to make sure they have a healthy ongoing relationship with their primary care doctor, because a lot of the key things that occur when we age can actually be prevented as well. And you don't have to, start when you're 20 or 30, even 50, 60, 70 even. There's still things that you can do to make sure that you're aging well, as what we were talking about.
I know that you just made the man sitting next to you very happy when you used the word prevention. Ed is a regular here on the show, and that's kind of been your life's mission, isn't it, Ed? You almost are trying to find that fountain of youth.
It certainly has. I use the term graceful aging, and I've been able and blessed to be able to watch over my 46-year career and being almost be 67 this year, the ravages of improper aging. And there is, and as the doctor said, we need a good primary care physician to manage the ups and downs, but we need someone like her who looks deeper into what can we do to make decisions that help slow that aging. I'm a big fan of a physician named Dr. Peter Attia, who wrote a book called Outlive, and he puts together a plan of what he calls a centenarian decathlon. If you think that you're going to be strong at 70 by not starting at 50, you are living in a fantasy land. You cannot wait till the machine breaks down in order to rebuild it. Any time of age would be great, but like she said, 50 is when we really need to get serious. And what is serious? Serious is creating a plan of action. It's not just saying, I'm going to eat more broccoli, or I'm going to the gym twice a week. It is a plan, like you're flying an airplane and you have to file a flight plan. And with that does require discipline. Discipline is one of the bigger breakdowns that prevent people from being able to stick to the plan. So that's something we have to be aware that we have to acknowledge that we're weak with discipline, so let's get stronger.
Are any of you familiar with it was a Netflix series called The Blue Zones? Do you know it?
I've seen them.
For anybody watching who might not know, it was a journey really at six different spots around the globe where they had this high number of centenarians, and they've kind of found the common thread that went through. And so when you mentioned the word plan, Ed, it took me to connection, because I remember that being one of them, that people as they age stay connected to a community. Would you find that to be true? Beth, I'll throw it to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is essential for brain health to challenge our brain. And I know that there are so many avenues on that we can play games on our phone and do these things for memory, and those things are good, but it is even better to have socialization. Think about how much your brain works when you interact with other people. You know, your senses are taking in all sorts of things, what they look like, what their tone of voice is, what their posture is, what they're saying, and all of that is engaging your brain. And it is very, very helpful. And we saw across the board during that horrible time of COVID, when people were isolated from one another, and how their cognitive ability plummeted, particularly in the older population.
So Nancy, I mean, obviously as we're talking, a lot of the conversation today is going to be more on the medical, physical side than the legal side, and yet every time you were here, on the show with me, so much of what you talk about is that connecting with people, because you're often talking not just to your individual client, but to their family.
Absolutely, because you know, you can have the same track basically up to where you're 50, and then things start to hurt, break down, you know, you're not moving as fast. You start to notice those things, but it's the whole family has to be involved in that kind of planning before a problem happens. And I hate to say it, but there are about 70% of people out there that have absolutely no estate plan in place. And that is really troubling to me. That means if something does happen and they become incapacitated, they have no one appointed with documents that are valid under the state law to help them, to step in, to take care of them, to make decisions for them if they need to. So this really is a crisis, and it's not only just the healthcare part of it, but it's managing what happens to you when you cannot help yourself.
So let me give people watching this morning a little bit of a rubric, if you will, of how the hour is intended to flow, because sometimes the conversation might apply to you, sometimes it might not. But here are kind of the points we're going to hit. When we come back, we're going to talk a lot more about dementia and how to prevent it, how to address it, how to talk to your doctor about it, that type of thing. We're going to talk about sleep. We're going to talk the legal side of things. We're going to talk nutrition. So it's going to apply to everybody watching, I'm sure. More to come on aging well when we come back. Welcome back. So let's jump right back into it and talk about dementia, Alzheimer's, and memory loss, because that might be one of the most fearful things for us as we do get older. So Beth, I'm going to go back and throw this to you again. Okay. First of all, the difference between the two, right? There's Alzheimer's and then there's dementia. Is that right?
Correct, yes. Actually, dementia is just an overall term describing how somebody's brain is starting not to work as well as it used to the point where they cannot enact their own activities of daily living. They can't, which is getting dressed, getting to appointments and taking medications and all those kinds of things. What happens is there is a disease in the brain that is killing those brain cells. Alzheimer's is the most common disease. And what happens with Alzheimer's, the brain develops these beta amyloid plaques and tau protein tangles. So plaques and tangles, if you just know plaques and tangles, you sound very intelligent about Alzheimer's disease. But so the plaques and the tangles are destroying the brain cells. There are other types of dementia. There are really 120 plus diseases that will cause dementia, or dementia symptoms actually. So one is vascular dementia. Something is interrupting the blood flow to the brain cells. Sometimes it's when people have a stroke. And the blood is leaking out. What happens, blood brings nutrients and oxygen to the brain cells, and if the brain cells do not get the nutrients and the oxygen, they shrink and die. So about 15% of dementia cases are vascular.
So can I ask a question real quickly? On the prevention side of things, if there is a way to prevent, Dr. Withers, if blood flow, oxygen is part of it, does that mean exercise is beneficial?
Well, exercise is beneficial, but nutrition really is the key piece there. We know that cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer of Americans, just point blank. And so nutrition plays a large part into that, because if we are improperly nourishing our bodies, then that's what starts to develop those plaques and those calcium deposits and things into our blood vessels early on. And then it does, as you age, start to present as memory loss, even whether you've had a heart attack or a stroke or not. I've had patients even where we've done early imaging studies for other reasons, and you still start to see those early signs of vascular damage going on within their brain, even then, and they aren't even having any dementia symptoms just yet.
Okay, so to that point, you see the evidence that it might be coming down the pike, but the symptoms are not there yet.
Right.
Does that mean that if you see it, you can step in to at least diminish what's about to happen?
You can, yes. So with proper nutrition, and proper nutrition really has to have a predominant plant focus. We talked about the blue zones. One of the things with those folks within the blue zones is that they eat a predominantly unprocessed plant forward type of diet. And so that's really important for that cardiovascular disease and for reversing those plaques and those things that are going on within the vasculature that promotes the memory loss and heart attacks and strokes.
I know Ed is ready to have his say. Tell me if I'm right or wrong, Ed. Don't you eat a Mediterranean diet almost exclusively?
I'm Mediterranean with a little bit higher protein than what they recommend, but I completely agree. And one thing, the big word she said to me is unprocessed foods. I always get on tangents for some period of time when I learn from people that I respect. And most mainstream medicine is always a decade at least behind on advice, always. Sometimes longer. Look at the red dye thing that just came up.
Yeah.
Our industry's been talking about it for 40 years, how red dyes are so injuring our children, and everybody censored it and ignored it, except our industry blasted it, and of course the mainstream didn't listen. But as far as unprocessed, I am totally convinced that seed oils are at the root of dementia. What are seed oils? Canola, safflower, bad oils that you cook in. Those are so processed with these horribly toxic carcinogenic chemicals that changes the molecular structure to cause cardiovascular disease, dementia, all the things that the brain is hugely built of fat. Well, guess what? If that fat is inferior, like seed oils, it's going to be an inferior thinking process. And so I'm hugely connected to cleaning that diet up, just like Dr. Withers is saying.
Okay, I'm gonna pause there. I told y'all when we began this that we may get through everything, we may kind of get sidetracked along the way. You said, Ed, cooking with those seed oils.
Yes.
But they're also hidden in things, right? Like mayonnaise will have them.
Oh, it's almost everywhere. I feel like I've reduced my seed oil by 92%, but I do eat out. Some of it's going to slip in. That's fine. I think reducing it by 80 or 90% will make a change. It takes 6 years to get seed oils out of the physical body, and we've all eaten them. And you know what? Our industry used to say sugar is so demon, it's terrible, it's destroying. It really wasn't the sugar. What was the issue that was killing us was that sugar was always connected to seed oils. Yeah, sugar's not super healthy, but it was a seed oil that was in those Twinkies and in those foods and in those even healthy foods that had canola. You can't find foods without canola and safflower oil.
Okay,
Almost in a package.
Okay, so there's a tip for you as you watch. Let's go back now to the idea that you suspect there is a problem. We're going to stay with the dementia conversation for a minute. And you're married. Okay, so you suspect this in your spouse. Should you, Dr. Withers, go to the doctor together? And if there is resistance from the spouse to address what might be happening, how do you have that conversation?
Yeah. So yes, you should go to the doctor with your spouse or partner. The reason for that is because a lot of times that patient, one, they may not necessarily agree or think anything's wrong. And a lot of times what happens early on is people still are cognitively able to kind of talk their way around things versus that spouse or that partner who may have seen things more peripherally. They can provide additional information to the doctor that can be helpful for making that diagnosis even earlier.
Is it appropriate to ask for a one-on-one with you, for example, in absence of the spouse? Is that HIPAA allowed?
And some of that, and maybe our attorney can speak to that as well, but some of that will depend on if the patient has given permission to discuss their health care with their partner or spouse
All right.
as well.
Why don't we pause there then, take a commercial, and then let's come back and address that if that's okay. The conversation is just getting started. I promise we hope to hit all of your points as well. Aging well when we come back. Welcome back. As we went to commercial, Dr. Withers was talking about dementia and how things can look in terms of dealing with that diagnosis with a spouse or a family member who might be assisting you. Then she threw to Nancy Cogar, and we had to go to commercial. So let's bring Nancy back in, talking the legal side of things, Nancy, because it's not always that easy if you don't, to your point earlier, have the proper plan in place. Is that right?
Yeah, sometimes the old times seem simpler, but we're not there anymore. So in an age of HIPAA, in an age of increasing concerns about litigation, elder abuse, all those things, you need to have documents in place, including a HIPAA release that help you as the individual making the documents, or help whoever it is you trust in your family help you. Or you don't want the person you don't trust in your family helping you either. So that is the best way to put a plan in place. I call my initial meetings with my clients strategy sessions, because we are talking about these same issues. I don't want to go to a nursing home. How can I protect everything I worked for all my life? I've got, I don't have anybody left. Who can be my proxy? Or my daughter lives in Colorado. Can she help? These are just real practical circumstances that have to be addressed.
This conversation, I told you up front, is very timely for me because we're going through this now with our mom, who's in great health, but when you're 94, things begin to change pretty rapidly. So Ed had mentioned earlier that you have to realize at 50, you hopefully are going to become 70 and address that. That if people come and sit with you at 65, it's hard to realize what they might need at 85. So do they often have periodic conversations with you, Nancy? And do you try to kind of encourage them to think ahead?
Well, the old-fashioned estate planning was you got a big book, you had no idea what was inside of it. You put it on a shelf or chucked it in a drawer, and you never looked at it again until someone passed away. That doesn't work anymore. So I tell my clients, I want to know if there's something that comes up. I know what the journey looks like, and all of the people here joining me know what that journey looks like. And circumstances are going to come up. So if you leave something that you made 25 years ago when your kids were 6 and 7, it is definitely not going to work. When you're 60, 70, maybe your first spouse has passed away, maybe you've lost a child, maybe they're grandchildren now, and you've got different assets. So all these things are building blocks that I look at and then kind of try to structure something that they're comfortable with, given the risk level.
So you had said that most people, though, don't take those strategic steps. So let's talk to the majority of people then this morning, and life is hitting them. And let's make it kind of the example we've been talking about, and that it's a dementia situation, since that's what our topic has been. and their loved one is in the throes of it, so that they're not really capable, if you will, of understanding all that's going on. What do they do? Suppose they haven't done this planning. Do they first get a power of attorney? Do they need to have a conservatorship? What do they do?
Well, it depends.
Okay.
Sounds like a real lawyer answer, doesn't it? Capacity is a requirement in order to make these documents. You are, in effect, giving away some of your constitutional rights. So you have to have the ability to know what you're doing and consent to it. So you should do it before you become incapacitated.
But if you haven't, what does that loved one do?
You've limited your options. Really, the most common option at that point is conservatorship, which means that you have to petition the court.
The loved one does,
Yeah.
like the non-dementia.
Correct.
Okay.
To take that loved one's constitutional rights away to whatever limited degree they can, and put someone in place based on the court's order to do those things with the court's supervision. So you can imagine which is easier and which is more complex and cumbersome and expensive.
And emotionally draining.
And emotionally draining, yes.
So, okay, Beth, I want to ask you this then. At Morning Point, I imagine that not everybody who walks through your door needing your assistance has done this either. So do they ever have a difficult time placing their loved one with you for care if they haven't had this taken care of with consent? Or does that make sense what I'm asking?
No, they can definitely do that.
Okay.
Most people have at that point acquired power of attorney for their loved one.
Okay.
And they most certainly can do that.
Talk about, I have a minute left for this part of it, but kind of get us started on this conversation, the resources that you do provide at Morning Point, because it is more than just being there to let people come to live with you. You're really a community resource.
We are. It is part of our philosophy at Morning Point, not just to serve the people and the families that have joined our communities, but also to guide people out in our community and tell them of resources and other things. So we feel very strongly about that. Our owners of our company feel very strongly about that. We do that throughout our footprint. We have 41 locations in the Southeast. Every one of our locations that has memory care has a caregiver support group once a month as part of our standard, because we believe in serving. And the people that come to our caregiver support groups don't necessarily have a loved one living with us.
And we will show you how to access that too before the hour is over. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, let's kind of table the dementia conversation for a minute. Let's focus on sleep and nutrition and the things you can do right this day to begin improving your life and aging well. We're back in a minute. Welcome back. Okay, ask yourself this question. How many hours of sleep did you get last night? How many hours of sleep do you typically get? I think I'm going to be right with what Ed Jones and Dr. Shayla Toombs-Withers are going to answer. But if it was less than 7, you're in big trouble, mister. Am I right? You need to get at least 7 hours of sleep if you're an adult?
At minimum.
Minimum.
And it's not even so much as the hours, it's the quality as well. Because if you've gotten 8 hours, but you were up every 2 hours because you were going to the bathroom or you were tossing and turning, then you still didn't get quality sleep. You know, we talk about brain function. What happens when we sleep is our bodies and our brain is designed to go through certain cycles. And what's happening is it's kind of regenerating a healthy brain for cognition. And so when you're not getting quality sleep and you're not reaching those levels of sleep that you should, then you're not accomplishing that goal.
You mentioned within, at least to me you did, that within your practice you also focus a lot on obesity, helping people through that. Correct. Am I right that improper sleep slows the metabolism?
It does, yep. It sets an imbalance in those hormones that help us to balance out hunger versus satiety or the feeling of being full when we don't get proper sleep. And then that's when folks tend to eat more during the daytime because that balance has been offset from the lack of the quality sleep that they've gotten.
It's somewhat of an epidemic. Ed is very passionate about this one because he's a self-admitted insomniac. Is that right, Ed?
I have been. Ever since my daughter was born 34 years ago, I became overly conscious about any noises, you know, and when she grew up, I still contained that little bit of sensitivity. And so I've played with it. I will say one thing, I completely agree. We don't know, first off, just because you say 7 hours, there's no way you're going to know that you're REM and deep unless you buy this ring called an Aura. I do not like the other ones that you wear. This has helped me more than any one gadget of my life. Secondly, no one ever speaks of this. When you mouth breathe at night, you're changing the ratio of carbon dioxide to oxygen to where you're going to have more anxiety and you're going to have more aches and pains. You're going to have everything else. Taping your mouth with proper tape every night is what I've done for 22 years. It is the number one thing that helps me to get better quality sleep. When you mouth breathe, you're going to have less health, and cognitively, it's going to be very damaging. Everybody who goes over there with dementia, 99% have had years of lack of REM and lack of deep. And we don't have a deficiency of Ambien, that's not the cure. I think you would agree with that. What we have is a loss of rhythm of sleep. I wrote an ebook that has been very popular, and we'll have the QR code at the end so you can access that. But using the right nutritional products, perhaps recreating different sleep atmospheres and different rhythms, I do believe the Aura ring, O-U-R-A ring, is a life changer for me.
What do you think of the Hatch alarm clock? Do you like it? Do you know the Hatch alarm clock? Do you know what I'm talking? Oh, well, if you're 20, you know the Hatch alarm clock. I have a 20-year-old at my house. But it is essentially like the sunrise.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Do you like
Yes,
it? Explain why, Ed.
Well, we're built into these certain rhythms of nature, and their circadian rhythms. I mean, just imagine 99.9% of the time on this earth, everything was based on the sun up and the sun down. And we still have those patterns within us. Now, I get up at 2:50 every single morning because I'm so disciplined and I know my schedule. I've made it work for me. But I've also needed this ring to help me make that work so I know what to do, when to do it. I learned that blue light out of my phone and an iPad will decrease my REM and deep. Right. And the brain cannot function if you don't have enough REM and deep sleep.
Okay, so doctor, let's say somebody's watching and this is a problem for them, or I'll go back again to the spouse, but what the spouse feels, you feel to a degree. So unless you're sleeping separately, you're both struggling if one of you is. How do they bridge that conversation with you, and are they always even aware that they're not getting enough sleep? Will they feel it or see it physically first? Does it age you, like physically age you?
Yes, it does. Yeah, and most of the time, what people will come to me and they'll say, "Oh, I'm tired all the time," or I can't fall asleep until it's way late at night, or something of that nature. But definitely that I feel tired all the time in the daytime is a key there. And then you start asking, well, how many hours of sleep did you get? And they give you this number. Well, did you wake up at all? I had one lady who told me she was trying to drink a lot of water, but she was going to the bathroom 3 times at night. So no, she's not getting quality sleep, and therefore it's still contributing to her weight, and it's contributing to her mood as well, because she's not getting quality sleep from that. We also talked about hormones and that balance at bedtime. Melatonin, our brains actually naturally make melatonin. We hear a lot about it. Well, go get some melatonin to help you sleep. Well, you would make it naturally if you start to get on a quality routine. You start turning those lights off because your brain is designed to go through this natural rhythm, and then you wouldn't need to be taking such high doses of these things thinking you need to pour more in.
There is a guest on the show who's here quite often, and he talks about how your brain has the ability to rewire itself. So you mentioned kind of forming that habit. Do you have to just kind of make yourself stick to it for a matter of weeks and not break it, and then the habit will kick in and your brain kind of will get used to this new way?
Right, yeah, create a routine and create it in a way to where you're doing that all the time, even the weekend. What'll happen for a lot of us is during the work week, we're able to kind of stay more routine because you got to get up and go to work, versus on the weekend and you say, oh, well, I'll just sleep in, or I'll stay up at night and watch my favorite show. But then that breaks that routine, and then it continues to contribute to the problem. So, start with turning the lights off, maybe a warm bath, maybe even some certain scents
like
have been
Epsom
shown,
salts and stuff
like lavender scent or chamomile. Even they make sprays. You can spray your pillow for those scents. There's some oils you can rub on your skin to do that as well, and those things will naturally help to calm the brain, calm the body, to help you then get more quality sleep as well that way.
Okay, when we come back, I want to talk food and nutrition, because as we get older, it's harder and harder to cook sometimes for ourselves and eat the proper way. So let's talk about that when we come back. Plus, I want to talk anxiety as we get older, if that's okay. We're back in a minute. Welcome back to our Aging Well show. I hope that you're learning a lot as the hour goes along. We certainly are. I was just talking to the studio audience. They've not had a chance to ask a question yet, but they're so intently listening, they haven't had a question yet to ask. So let's jump in now and talk about the nutrition side of things, because it's no secret that our food really is not what it used to be. It's harder and harder, I think, to get the nutrients that we need through food alone. And then as you get older and maybe your cooking habits change, that's another thing to add to that negative list. So am I right that it is harder and harder to get proper nutrition through diet alone?
So you can get a lot of proper nutrition through diet, but it depends on what you're putting in. So you definitely want to be putting in healthful foods. You definitely, things that I typically tell patients, dark leafy greens, you want them to be a priority through your day. A couple of reasons why: they are natural anti-inflammatory foods by those dark leafy greens. They help to, we talked about plaques and how that plays a part in our brain health and our cardiovascular health. So those dark leafy greens actually help to clean up some of those things within our body. So that should definitely be a priority. Some other things that you should probably steer clear from are things like dairy, and once again, those processed foods and those oils, because those things are going to be more inflammatory producing types of foods. And then you definitely want to eat things that are going to put more omega-3s into your body for brain health. So from a plant perspective, it can be chia seeds, it can be flax seeds. It's great when you can eat these things, because what I like when people eat these things is that they also get the fiber. And so we know that gut health is also tied to our brain health as well. And so you're improving both by eating these things versus just taking a supplement, where supplements sometimes get broken down more, and you don't get as much of that overall nutrition. But if you've got a limited diet, then supplementation definitely could be helpful.
The gut is the second brain. Am I right in saying that your gut changes as we get older, though? Do the microbiomes in your gut either deplete, grow? Do they shift as we get older?
Yes, your gut can shift, and not just so much as you get older, but even at times of illness, your gut microbiome changes, depending on your dietary status. Your microbiome will be changing, but you can actually create a healthy gut microbiome by eating a lot of what's called prebiotic type of foods, and that's going to tend to be your more high fiber foods, your more fermented type of foods, and so then you can start to create that healthy gut, and then you can use probiotics even to help put down then more natural healthy bacterial growth within the gut.
So once again, you want to put quality in. So Ed, I'm going to throw this to you, because you, throughout the 46 years that you've been doing this, you yourself select each thing that comes into nutrition world, right?
So cautious that if anything is a suspect, we remove it, for one. And I take a lot of supplements, but I do still believe, as Dr. Withers, the knife and fork is the most powerful weapon we have. The gym is the second. Supplementation's big into my life. But we can't, I have too many people who just think you can do these pills and they can eat unhealthy, and we can't do that. But I do like partnering with all of this trifecta of choices in our life. And I'm glad you mentioned the microbiome, because that is a second brain, and it's being destroyed by, number one, antibiotics, number two, glyphosate in our foods. That is Roundup that has been sprayed on 70% of the food you eat, that was patented as an antibiotic in 1972. People don't know that. So you're taking an antibiotic every time you eat corn, every time you eat soy. You are ingesting an antibiotic. So how are we going to fight that? One is try to buy foods that are not sprayed with glyphosate. I don't try to be perfect about it. Life's too good, and we need to enjoy our life, but we need to be cautious and have wise discernment. And then secondly, eat cultured foods, fermented foods, and the right probiotics. That's where we personalize at Nutrition World, because there's so many. And we don't have all the answers, but with 400 people a day that come through Nutrition World, I have 37 staff members who are passionate. I have 17 practitioners. Our whole job is to empower people and personalize these choices. Which is better for you, do we think? This one or this one? And sometimes it's none. It's better that you don't do any of this and go see someone else.
Let me ask you something, not to jump in, but we live in this world, and I'll go back to my mom and being 94, and she's done darn good to learn how to use a computer to a large degree, pays her bills online and all that kind of stuff. Doesn't mean that she likes it. And it is very difficult to talk face to face with somebody. I think I know for each one of you. that's what you'll receive if they reach out to you. Ed, if they come to Nutrition World, your staff's going to talk to them. Shayla, the same thing. Beth, Nancy, you really want conversation, just like we're providing this morning. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Right.
Is it important to stress?
Very important. Yeah, you know, like Ed mentioned, you don't want people to kind of just out there doing it on their own without that proper support, because as you know, I've seen folks who will come to my office and they'll have a whole bag of supplements and they still aren't feeling well. They don't really know why they're taking them. They just picked up a bunch of things versus, you know, having someone who's knowledgeable about those supplements, you know, at Nutrition World, for instance, and getting something that's more quality. And then with me helping them to build their diet, they tend to maybe not even need all of those,
Right.
just a few.
So we knew the hour was going to fly by, and Nancy just raised her hand, and I've got to catch my last commercial. So let me see if I'm going to get this right. Real quickly when we come back, we're going to give you some tips on why that sleep is so important, how it's directly linked to the health of your brain, give you some facts on that. Nancy has a podcast. She's going to talk about how she can kind of keep you connected with those loved ones, which is so important. Talk a little bit about stress and anxiety. I'm getting stressed out because we're running out of time, but stick around. Aging Well finishes up when we come back. So sometimes during the commercial breaks, the panelists have spoken up and said, you know, here's another point that I'd like to be able to make. So in one of those commercials, Beth had mentioned a little bit more on the sleep part of our conversation and how when you don't get the proper sleep, it does then lead to those breakdowns, I guess, if you will, in the brain. You had a name for them at the beginning of the hour, and I've forgotten them.
The plaques.
Well, the plaques, but then
Yes.
wasn't there's something else, 2 words that
The
you
beta
used.
amyloid and the tau.
See, they know. Take it away, Beth. So if you are not getting proper sleep, though, it can really lead to
So
problems.
studies have shown, particularly a lot of the studies coming from Sanders Brown Center on Aging in Lexington, Kentucky, they're studying about the inflammation in the brain and how inflammation in the brain can lead to the development of those plaques that are associated with Alzheimer's disease. So when you are sleeping, you have these little cells called microglia that clean out the inflammation in your brain while you are sleeping. So if you do not sleep, you not give them the time to do their work. And I know that also we were going to touch on anxiety.
Yeah.
When we are very anxious, we have a level of cortisol that spikes, and those spikes in cortisol can have a negative effect on a little structure in our brain called the hippocampus, which is in charge of memory and learning.
So let's talk then, if we can, about the anxiety, because I'll go back and use my mom as this example. She's 94, and very often when I talk to her, things are making her stressed out. Simple things aren't simple anymore, and you can just feel it mounting. And I guess, Dr. Withers, it's because she hasn't been there before. None of us has been there before. We haven't gotten old yet.
Right. And so, and you know, we talked about early signs that some memory loss or cognitive issues may be coming into place. Anxiety actually can be one of those signs because, you know, is that individual anxious because they lost the keys or, you know, or they forgot how to get to the grocery store, for example, when they always go to the grocery store. And so that can even just present itself as a symptom. And then, you know, we talked about the sleep and the cortisol piece. Well, that also plays a part in our mental health. It plays a part in our weight. It plays a part in our memory and our concentration and our focus. So a lot of these things, you know, just can compound on top of one another.
Especially today's older generation, I think, have a lot of pride, well-earned pride, and they maybe don't always want to admit that they need the help. So Ed, I'm going to throw this to you for a minute, though, because you go through life changes as you get older. You lose friends, you lose family members. How does that not breed anxiety? And sometimes you need a little help to get you through. Do you ever see that at Nutrition World?
Anxiety is epidemic. There's no doubt that we have more percentage-wise of people ever probably in the history of mankind that is have anxious thoughts and or anxiety. I did a summit, anxiety summit with myself and 4 other experts in this city, and it's on nutritionw.com. You purchase it for $30. It's 5 hours of 1 hour a piece of the people I totally respect. Has every component of this, of how to treat the platform of it, which is the underlying roots like a tree. we don't, again, Xanax can play a role that's important in a very short run, but it's highly addictive and it's highly not solving the problem. A guy yesterday came in, and we have a product called Anxio Calm. It's made from an herb. He said, I could never do an MRI, but I went and did one last week, and I took 2 of those, and he said, I almost went to sleep in the MRI. And I love to hear those stories of the green pharmacy. The safety of this is amazing when pharmaceuticals sometimes are not. But, I think we have lost one, the sense of community. Mm-hmm. 2 is we don't have enough solitude time. We have learned to not be comfortable with quiet and solitude, so we always are distracting. I have to fight that distraction myself, but reconnecting to the earth, having quiet time to yourself, not busy time, and being present instead of doing, you're being. And that's a very important path for myself.
I'm going to show people before the hour is over how to continue hearing from all of you, because many of you have podcasts. Nancy, you're one of them. And I think I'm right that on your Boomer Time podcast, part of what you do is you talk to people like me, whose parents are getting older, to help us know kind of how to successfully navigate these years. Am I right?
Right, because that caregiving experience can be so isolating. And again, you're not there until you're there. Mm-hmm. So it's a completely new foreign experience. So while I'm a estate planning attorney, I also want to be an advocate for those people, because I believe it dovetails and it also helps people understand why they need to do certain things.
Let's talk about being an advocate for a minute, because everyone needs one, legally, medically, which really would be legally. Mm-hmm. In choosing that advocate, if you have multiple people to choose from, you've got to do some serious thinking, I guess, about who thinks either most like you or who's going to stand kind of strong against you in a way where you might not be so willing to go. Do you ever counsel people through that, any of you, and how do you choose the right advocate?
All the time. And they'll even say to me, I don't want so-and-so ever making any decisions for me. And we can put those, preclusions in the documents. That may avoid litigation, a family dispute, 5-10 years down the road. So those conversations are just essential. You may have one child that cries at the drop of a hat, is just really emotional and sensitive. Mm-hmm. And then you've got another that's, let him go.
Okay, to that point, we are hopefully going to continue to age well. And so what we think we might want, who we think our kids might be when we're 75, if we live to be 95, we're all going to change a little bit. It seems like there becomes a little bit of pragmatism that hits as we get older, where you know your life is in the ending stages. And it's not quite so difficult for you to talk about it as it might be your kids. Right. Is that true? Do you ever experience that?
Oh, yeah. It can be a difficult conversation. Maybe, and oftentimes we just came through the holidays. Mm-hmm. So you'll go and you see your parents, and they're not as with it as they were last year. Maybe dad was driving and hit the side of the barrier at the grocery store. Those are tough conversations to have. Mm-hmm. But they're things that need to be handled right away and in the right way.
Let's talk a little bit about prevention again. One of the audience members have brought up the question of when do you get, and can you get, like a baseline mental test? I only have a minute left, but if I'm 54, should I go and find out how my brain is functioning now?
Yeah, so start with your primary care physician. They can do a couple of things. They can do mini mental status exam. They can do even just mental health evaluation to see, is this anxiety, is this depression, or is this more of a cognitive decline type of presentation that's going on? Is it a hormonal change? Do we need to test for that as well?
Right.
So start there, and then they can go from there.
We have barely scratched the surface. Again, one of the audience members said we could do a series on this, and I wish that we did have more time. I've got to go to commercial, though. When we come back, grab a pen and paper during the commercial, because I'm going to show you how you can continue learning from these panel of experts when we come back. I want to say a big thank you to all of our panelists for being a part of the hour. Even though our time with them this morning is up, you can continue to listen and to learn from them. Let me show you how. Nancy Cogar, as we've referenced, has a weekly podcast. She calls it Boomer Time with Nancy Cogar, covering a wide range of topics each week about living life well. You can hear more from Dr. Toombs Withers on her podcast, The Essence of Health Tea Time podcast. She's on all platforms, including Apple and Spotify. Ed Jones also has a podcast called The Holistic Navigator. You can hear him on Vital Health Radio each weekend on 98.1 The Lake, and his ebook on sleep that he referenced is available using the QR code that you see there on your screen. And Morning Point Assisted Living, the senior living facilities that she mentioned, they have support groups going on at all of their memory care locations for you to go and learn more at morningpoint.com. Age well, everybody. See you tomorrow.